that microphone? Can be heard in here?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
It's not just for the Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm not here on Shabbat.
No, you're right.
How can I help you? I have a little bit of flyer to introduce you with, and then I will let you fill in all of the communion.
Killer Constantine.
Wowza.
By the way, the leftover drip is gone.
Good.
And it is. I have a cold check out.
This is your granddaughter, I remember. Yes.
I said kids.
That's right. She's got her eyeliner on and everything.
I'm going to make sure the door's open.
Recording in progress.
We're going to need you to do your own Lima because the camera, for people zooming, that's the only way they're going to see you. So they're going to zoom and we're going to have everybody sit in that first section.
מה זה הרעש הזה? What is noise? Lilian, long time no see you. We start any moment. Shalom Aleichem.
You didn't know. You were in the booth.
Difficult for her.
You walked into the bakery. Said, Yaakov. And they are very, very nice people. They were very welcoming. So it was good. They kind of, in a way, I took care of you. I don't know what they needed.
We have a friend together. He was a cantor. I don't know if you remember him. He was actually the shidduch between me and Yaakov. So he just met me with them and became to be a very close friend. Nice to meet you.
That's kind of
I was on the East Meadow recently. Thank you. Thank you.
don't tell it to Aisha.
We have a concert last night. We have a concert.
Was very good. It's a good setup.
No, it's close. Okay. I went to Brown. Beautiful. And they're
Okay.
Okay.
Dear friend, I'm going to be start Mincha Mariv and then we continue. So we are using the gray book. We have here a chord on the last chord on the left. Page 120. אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יללוך סלה. Page 120, please. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו ולך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד ואנחנו נברך אמת עבד עולם הללויה יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בכל מה דברה קילותיהם ומלכותיהם בחיי חונם ומכונם ובחיי דרכו בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהלל ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. Please rise facing to this way, 122. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו לאבותינו לאברהם ליצחק וליעקב האל הגדול הגיבור ונורא העליון גומר חסד נתוני הכל זוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גוי לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע מגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה מתים מטרה ולהושיע מוריד הטל מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיה מתים רחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים מתיר אסורים כמה ומתור שני הפהר מי כמוך בגבורות ומדומה לך מלך ומתחמץ מהשוע ונמלתך ומתים מנוחתה אדוני מחיה המתים נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם מלך צינו דור ודור הללויה דור אדוני גודלך ולנצח נצחים ושון קדיש ושבחך אלוהינו פנה מוש עולם ועד כן מגדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We read silent Amida until page 130. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל במרו אמן. page 134. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעול מה דברה כאילו תן מוחותי בחייכון ומכל מלכת לכל בית ישראל בעגלה זמן קריב במרו אמן. שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמעולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה ברכו. אלא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמרה ברמה במרו אמן. תתקבץ לא תון ובוטון וכל ישראל קדם עוון ומשמע ואמרו אמן. יש למה רבה מן שמע וחיים עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו והוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ואמרו אמן. 135 עלינו. עלינו לשבח לדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגוהר עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים, משתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, מושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, שכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום וידעת היום והשבות לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד, על כן נקבלך אדוני אלוהינו. כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. מונס קדיש 136. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ועולמה דברה קילותה והמליך מלכותה. וחייכונו ויום יכונו חיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמעולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה ברכו. לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ואמרו אמן. We continue 137 מעריב. אורך ומכפר עבור מולו השכיבי בלש ופרוקור חמתו אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ביום קוראנו. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. You may be seated. ברוך אתה אדוני מכל העם שדרו מרבים. חי וקנת מלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב ערבים, אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, והם נגע יומם בלילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו עולמי, ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Let we join together שמע ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כמלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך, כל לבבך וכל נפשך וכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, וים שמע תשמוע מצוותיו אשר מצווה אתכם היום. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, שרוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Middle of page 139. מלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני עשה לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נהורתי לא תוסף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך בכאן לפני משה זה ליאנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל, השכיבנו אדוני לשלום. שמור צאתנו בעיניכם שלום אתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בול מה דברה קירותם במחותיו וחייכונו במחול מחייתך בית ישראל. ועגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. השמרה בה מבורך לעולם ולמעולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו. נעלה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה אדם ירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. We read silent עמידה. Please rise from page 142 to page 148. אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד, על כן נקבלך אדוני אלוהינו. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. מורניס קדיש 151, יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעולמה דברה קירותי ואמליך מלכותי, בחיי חונו ביום חונו, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. השמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו. נעלה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, דם ירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבץ לאותון ובאותון דכל ישראל קדם ובום נשמע ואמרו אמן. יש למה רבה מן שמה וחיים עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ואמרו אמן. עשה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ואמרו אמן. You remain standing. Okay, please. Second person. Stay here. Just one line here. Facing this way because there's the camera right there. Please come over. Stay here. Please. Stay 6, yes. I would like to recite El Malach Rachamim. Sandra, you can come in. Come closer. Put on the Zoom, people need to see you. On page 200, if you want to follow up, we have El Malach Rachamim, special memorial prayer for all these 6 million people that we lost on the Holocaust. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהירים לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, על ידי המרצחים הגרמנים ועוזריהם משאר העמים, שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר Amen. The last thing we do the Kaddish on page 2001. I'm going to be read each word. You can leave the candle there now, please. Here on this. Two, 201. 201. You can go back to your seat, please. I'm going to be read word, and you're going to be try to read it on the places that we have the ghetto there. We're waiting to the rest. I'm going to be start. יתגדל
Auschwitz,
ויתקדש
Lodz,
שמי רבה
Honar,
בעלמא דברה קירותה
Babi Yar,
וימליך מלכותה
Majdanek,
בחייכון וביומכון
Birkenau,
ובחיי דכל בית ישראל
Kovno,
בעגלה בזמן קריב
Janoska,
ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח
Theresienstadt,
ויתפאר ויתרומם
Buchenwald,
ויתנשא ויתהדר
Treblinka,
ויתעלה ויתהלל.
Vilna,
שמי דקודשה
Bergen-Belsen,
בריחו לאלה
Mauthausen,
מן כל ברכתה ושירתה
Dachau,
תושבחתה ונחמתה
Minsk,
דאמירם בעולמה
Warsaw,
ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. You may be seated.
okay. Thank you, Cantor, for leading us in Mincha and Mariv and in that prayer of remembrance. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sandra Weingarten. I'm the president here at Old Westbury Hebrew Congregation. I'm so glad to have you here this evening with us in remembrance of the Shoah. We're very lucky this evening to have Alex Constantine here. I'm going to give you a brief bio, and then I will let him tell his story himself. Alex was born in 1937 in Varennes, Poland. The fear of the Nazis forced the family out of their home, seeking refuge in the countryside. This was in 1941 when Alex was just a young boy. The father of his family was poisoned by a farmer. The burden of survival was assumed by his mother. They were fighting the Nazis and hunger the entire time. The last 2 years of German occupation, they were sheltered by a kind Polish landowner in a small underground bunker. After the war, Alex's mother remarried and the family moved to Israel. Alex completed high school and spent 2.5 years in the Israeli army. He joined the family in the U.S. following his army service. Following graduation from college and the Jewish Theological Seminary, Alex dedicated his life to Jewish education. He retired in 2009 from his position as principal of East Meadow Jewish Center. He and his wife, Susan, presently reside on Long Island, and they are blessed with 2 children and 8 grandchildren. And it's my honor to introduce Alex to share his story with all of you. You're welcome.
Hi, everybody.
I don't have a PowerPoint. Okay. See, that's an expert on here. Okay. Testing? Yes. Okay. I move around a lot, so I will adjust. As you heard, my name is Alex Constantine. I am a survivor. I was born in Poland in a tiny, tiny village. I don't know how to describe, even tinier than a shtetl. And on September 1st, 1937, when I was 2 years old, September 1st, 1939, as you know, war broke down. My family, I have here some pictures, which is hard to see, but we do our best, of my family. Maternal pictures. She has here 2 brothers and her husband and the parents. And they worked for a wealthy owner by the name of Mr. Holimka. And Mr. Holimka had very good relations with the family. He had such good relations with the family that he invited my mother, who was at the time when she was the age of his children, for homeschooling. He could afford homeschooling. Nobody else could. So my mother learned there German. She spoke Yiddish, but she learned German. I mention it because it kind of helped us to survive. The family, my father was a meal merchant. He was a flour merchant, I would say. Flour, not that you smell, but that what you eat. He used to buy grain from a certain Mr. Burka. Good business relationships, and heavy artillery is coming. Yes. Okay. See what happens when one is not a cantor, you know. Okay. How is this? Okay, don't have to shout. I was just raising my voice on my kids during my tenure as the principal. So he was traveling the roads. He didn't have much competition simply because the roads were dangerous. They were, for one reason or another, they were bandits in the area. He was always driving with one of the brothers, and luckily no harm came to him. When whatever money he made, he invested in gold. That's what I feel doing now when I see the market going down. And he also understood the Polish culture and the Polish anti-Semitism. He experienced it. My mother was a young lady who was a homemaker. When I was born, she dedicated herself to to upbringing me the best way she could. And that was basically what young women did. They were homemakers. They didn't have professions like today and so forth. Now, our life didn't change much when World War II broke out. The Germans conquered Poland in record time. They call it the Blitzkrieg. It's just amazing, a large country like that, fell apart within 2 to 3 weeks. They were not prepared for the onslaught of the German army, which was well equipped. Our life didn't change much. The village was so numerically insignificant and so away from the centers of Jewish life that the Germans didn't bother with it yet. I assume they were concentrating on larger Jewish populations. And our life still went on routine. One thing we remembered, we had to wear the Jewish star. And the directive was, if we catch you without the Jewish star, we will shoot you on the spot. Now, to me, it was like an ornament to a child, but my parents felt like they had a target on their back, so to speak. But I had to bear it. Our life changed in 1941. I am 4 years old, and Hitler, who made a peace treaty with Stalin, the Russian dictator, in order to keep it at bay and not to interfere in him conquering Poland. Successfully, he stayed away. He got so arrogant, and his generals as well, with conquest of almost all of Europe, with exception of Britain, I guess. And that he decided to break this treaty and attack Russia. Now the Russians, to slow them down, and he threw against Russia 1 million soldiers with heavy equipment, quite successfully progressed at the beginning. The Russians, to slow them down, as I said, used heavy artillery fire. And many of the shells fell on villages, which triggered an exodus of refugees running away from the dangers of war, mainly women and children. Now, some refugees, Jewish refugees, came to our village. They were scared, hungry. My parents were better to do than some other families in the village, fed them, gave them lodging, and they listened to their stories. And their story was the same. Namely, the Germans used to surround, and they came from different locations, yet their story was the same. Germans surrounded a Jewish neighborhood, gave an order for the Jews to assemble at the central place, wherever it was, take 2 suitcases, loaded them up on truck, and took them away. These refugees, who obviously escaped because they found themselves in our village, were asked by my parents, where did they take them? Nobody knew at that time anything. And they said they don't know for sure. They heard from some Poles that they took them to labor camps. And my mother asked, who do they take to these labor camps? And she didn't like the answer. The answer was everybody. Now, this scared my parents a lot because they didn't anticipate this. To them, labor camp, you take able-bodied men, but they took women, children, old men, everybody. My mother, who was a very unassuming, quiet even-tempered woman, but she was by nature an activist. And she said to my father, we have to do something about it. I cannot allow them to come here, load us up on truck, and make us disappear. My father didn't know what to do. As I said, he traveled the road of Poland and understood the Poles who were very hostile to the Jews and anti-Semitic. And the anti-Semitism in Poland goes back way years, mainly thanks to the Catholic Church. So he didn't know what to do. My mother said, well, you don't know what to do? I will come up with something. And she says, see these refugees streaming by our village day and night. We will join them. We will masquerade as Polish refugees. Now, this is a little dangerous. To take off the stars, you were punished by death. But she felt that it's worthwhile to take a chance. My father, he was a little reluctant, mainly because of his appearance. Now, my mother, if you want to see the picture of the family after my talk, you will see that she has that all-European look. You cannot place her. She can be from France, she can be from Poland, she can be from Russia. And I have a Slavic look. I got it. So, I had a Slavic look, still have a Slavic look, namely fuller lips, wide nose, blue eyes, and brown hair. I looked like a typical boy, Polish boy. My father had an ethnic face, so to speak. It was a Jewish face, that the Pole could spot a Jew a mile away. They were like bloodhounds. It's amazing. And he had an ethnic face. He had an elongated face, a longer nose, black eyes, and very dark hair. He was afraid because of his appearance, he will bring danger on us. My mother persisted, and he agreed finally that we leave the house. And at the end of summer, 1941, she prepared a bag for perishable food and a bag for clothing for winter. She didn't know how long we will be on the road. And we walked out of the house. We became instantly homeless. My mood was good. I was in an upbeat mood. I thought we were going on a picnic. As a child, 4-year-old child, that's what I thought. My parents were with me. We had food. We slept under the stars, which is an adventure by itself to me. And when the weather was bad, we snuck into a bar and slept deep in the straw or hay of the bar. Pretty soon we ran out of food, much sooner than my parents expected. And my father tried to to buy some food with the gold coins. Was sometimes successful, sometimes not. I just want to digress a minute and mention how they took the coins with them, not to arouse any suspicion. My mother formed I would call a tool belt that the peasants were wearing around their waist. She took a piece of coarse fabric, cut it to size, anchored the cord row after row with thread, covered it with another piece of fabric. And my father had a very, quite heavy and very expensive tool. And this toolbox. And this way, we kind of didn't arouse suspicion, oh, here go the wealthy Jews, let's rob them. Now, what happened is, my mother had a problem with the nosy Polish women who were challenging her. They were pointing out and saying, this man there that walks at the very end of our group, there are clusters of 50 groups, 50, 60 people walking. And is he your husband? Yeah, my mother said. And they said, why isn't he here with us? Why is he always walking there? My father was walking there with in the middle of the heat with a scarf half covering his face, very, very afraid that he'd be recognized as a Jew. My mother came up with a clever idea. She told them, you don't want him among us? He suffers from a contagious disease. He suffers from tuberculosis. When they heard TB, they just were very happy that he stayed behind and the subject was closed. And very slowly, very deliberately, we moved south. I had nothing on my mind, nothing serious on my mind as a 4-year-old child, but imagine the element of uncertainty. My parents were just drifting. They were just walking, but didn't know where. Walking to nowhere. It's a terrible feeling. Well, yet they drifted with the refugees. In the early summer of 42, we were on the road a while already, there was a lot of activity on the road. And it scared my parents because they noticed some Germans on motorcycles were cruising around, stopping some refugees, interrogating them. Some they took away, and some they let go. There was partisan activity in the forest, and they were interrogating them to find out whatever they wanted to find out. If they caught us without the star, masquerading as a Polish person, they would shoot us on the spot. So my father is trying to find a place to stay, a little permanent place. And again, the element of uncertainty. You knock on a door, you don't know who will open it. Will it be a kind man, a nice person, or a hostile man? Nevertheless, they knocked. A man opened the door, looks at us and immediately says, go away, refugees. Didn't say go away, Jews. Go away, refugees. It's possible that refugees were bothering him quite a few times, begging for food. And my father kind of anticipated such a welcome, so he had 5 coins in his hand, And it says, we came here to make you a business proposition, he said. We are tired from walking, so tired. Give us some shelter so we can rest a little. And the men became instantly friendly. So, they heard about gold, but never seen a golden coin. And took us to a bunker under the ground, which was near the barn, gave us some straw, gave us a kerosene lamp, a bucket for waste, and we just left. He just left. Next day, he brought us some food. We stayed there 10 days. One evening, he comes into the hall that we were in, holding in his hand a plate covered with a kerchief, and it smelled very good. It smelled like pastry. And he uncovers it ceremoniously, kind of. My mother described it later, and says, "It's my birthday today. My wife baked some pastry, and I brought some to share it with you." We were very grateful, and my father thanked him. He said, "Enjoy," and left. My father breaks off a piece of it, gives me a piece, gives my mother a piece, and start eating himself ravenously. We haven't seen pastry in almost a year. Now, I take one bite and swallow and throw up violently, like instantly. My mother the same. My father, who already swallowed a few bites, stopped eating and kind of like stood for a while, and then he fell to the floor. The man poisoned us. He tried to get rid of us. I don't know why, but he tried to murder us. My mother rushed to my father, begged him to open his mouth. She should insert a finger and make him gag to return that. He didn't respond to her. The pain must have been so terribly painful that he clenched his mouth and didn't respond to her pleas. He was on the floor there in terrible agony. My mother, to make him feel a little more comfortable, put his head in her lap and was sitting over him and crying. I myself sat next to him, holding on to the chair, and I was crying too. My father was in terrible pain. And then he stopped moving. I was happy that he stopped moving. I said, I was thinking, now he sleeps, so he's at peace. It doesn't hurt anymore. My mother kept crying. I didn't understand why. And then we sat like that for a while. And then my mother shocked me by saying that she just got up, put his head gently in the dirt, and said to me, "We have to leave now." I became hysterical. "We cannot leave Father here. He is sick. He's sleeping now, but he's in a lot of pain," I said. My mother didn't want to hear from it, was yanking me away from my father. in her mind, she was afraid that the owner of the place who took us in will come back to see whether he did a good job killing us, we'll see to survivors, and finish us off there. So she felt danger. She had the presence of mind to grab the belt and yanked me out. Very reluctantly, I left my father, and we ran into the field. Now here is a young woman in her 20s, really, have to contend with two powerful enemies. One enemy, the Nazis, we kind of handled because we fooled them. We were Polish refugees. The second enemy, not easy to fool. It is hunger. And when you're hungry, you cannot just pretend that you are not hungry. It eats at you. And we were hungrier and hungrier. We were trying to beg food. My mother, not too successfully, we were very filthy. We just washed in the summer and in some ponds along the way. She rubbed more dirt into my face. I must have been a very pitiful figure of a child because I was dirty and skinny, long hair. She told me, knock on the door, they open, say, kawałek chleba, proszę. A piece of bread, please. And I was quite successful. They probably felt something. I looked so pitiful that they gave it to me. We bought the rest of the food here and there by using the gold coins. And eventually they didn't want to give us food. They didn't have it. I don't know what it was. And we were beginning to starve. And my mother, in desperation, ran into the village at night. I was sitting in the shallow woods somewhere, in case she has to run, somebody chasing her. And she was looking in garbage, finding any remnants of food, any rotten vegetables and so on, and bring it to me. She used to put it in her mouth, masticate it, grinding it up, and feeding it to me. And I ate it like it was food, not garbage. I was so hungry. She ate it too. But when you eat garbage, it doesn't help you. There's no nutritious value in it, and you lose strength. And my mother felt at a certain point in time, by dragging herself along the road, that she cannot walk anymore. She sat down under a tree, leaned against the tree, took me in her hand, and was waiting to die. While her head was down like that, somebody tapped on her shoulder. She looks up, a woman standing over her. The woman says, "My goodness, you look like you were dead. Oh, I'm glad you're alive. Is the boy okay?" My mother whispered to her, bring us some bread and water. And very obligingly, the woman ran into the house and brought us some water and bread, and was very attentive to me. And she extended the invitation to us to come into the house because it's so hot outside. She helped my mother up. She took me in her arms, and my mother leaned on her shoulder, and slowly, slowly, we got to the house. In the house, she spread a blanket off the floor. We crawled into it and just fell asleep until next morning. Next morning, she told us, her husband wasn't there, and we didn't want to ask too many questions, and we didn't. Next morning, she extended to us an invitation. She said, you can stay a little longer, but you have to wash up. You're so filthy, you have to get rid of your clothes because I don't know what's in it. I will give you some of mine clothing, said to me, and for me, she had some clothing too from her other child. Now, she warmed some water for my mother, an absolute angel of mercy. My mother washed up first time in many, many months. She washed up in warm water, was a pleasure. And she relayed to me later that when she got out of the bath, the woman gasped, kind of almost like didn't recognize her. And then the woman, and she dressed in the woman's clothes. She was very thankful for it. And then the woman said something which scared my mother, and she said, give the boy a bath in the same water. I cannot afford to heat more water. He's so filthy, he's so filthy, she said. And my mother immediately thanked her a lot and says, no, we will go now. You were absolutely saved us from starvation. You're an angel. We don't want to overstay our welcome. And the woman insisted. And the reason she insisted, she was so focused on me, she told us that she had a son about my age, a little older, who was playing outside along the dirt road, and convoys of German tanks and trucks passed by. A grenade fell off a truck carelessly. The boy found it, played with it. It blew up and killed him. So that's why she was so focused on me. She became suspicious that my mother didn't want to give me a bath. What's wrong with you? She thought. My mother, in her heart, she knew that the woman was so nice to us because she thought we were Polish refugees. She didn't want her to see that I was circumcised. The woman became more and more suspicious, so I took off my clothes, climbed into the tub, and the tub was kind of made of metal, and they used to do their laundry on a scrub board. Hard work, ladies, scrub board, wow. And then they used to take a bath in it too. She was shielding me with her body, yet the woman noticed. Smiling, she walked out. She says, I'll be back in a few minutes. And she came back. She came back a changed woman. She looked at us with hatred in her eyes and said to the Polish policeman, take these leprous Jews out of here. So, and I cannot understand it until today, yesterday she was an angel of mercy, like I called her. What changed? And today, she is sentencing us to die. Yesterday she saved our life. Today, get rid of them. Hard to understand. Parshive Żydy, she said. If you even don't know Polish, it's such an ugly sound to it. It's such an insulting thing to say. There are certain words that we don't say because there is a history behind it. We don't say, let's say, here in the United States, the N-word, because it has a painful history behind it. It's not proper. But this was so filled with hate. So the Poles didn't like Jews. Okay. But what did a young mother and a little boy do to her? It's hard to explain it. Well, the policeman took us away. My mother begged him to let us go. He said, no. They find out I let the Jew go, they will kill me. I will bring you not to a Gestapo station where they will kill you like immediately. We will bring you to a police station which will, they will keep you a few days. That's the choice he gave us. He brought us to the police station, to a large cell filled with Jews that they caught in roundups in the neighborhood. Some were crying, some were praying. It was a very pitiful sight. We found the corner of the cell, we sat on the floor and we waited. A few minutes later, another Polish policeman comes in and asks, who of you women knows how to cook well? My mother raised her hand immediately, but she had competition. She had 3 other women raise their hands. And he looked at my mother and he said, you are too young to be a very good cook, but since you are the cleanest of them all, come with me. Took her to the kitchen, and she started cooking, and noticed immediately that the cook was a terrible cook. So good for her, because she excelled in cooking. And we stayed there because she excelled in cooking so much, 3 weeks. What happened in the cell meanwhile? The cell was filled up. They used to bring a truck. They loaded up the Jews on the truck, took them away. After a while, you had slowly bringing more Jews that they caught in the area, and that's how it went. One truck after another picked up the Jews and took them. Later, we found out that they were massacring them in neighboring woods. The commander of the camp was talking to my mother in German. My mother was answering to him in Polish. And she didn't want him to know that she understands German. I questioned her about it later. And she said, I don't know how to explain it, but it was like a gut feeling, she called it. I didn't want him to know. And one day they had to leave the complex, and she overheard the commandant of the camp telling his deputy, get rid of the woman and the child in the morning, we have to leave. We don't take them with us. They had to leave for one reason or another, I don't know, possibly because of the movement of the Russian army, but I had to leave the complex. And my mother immediately started to make preparations to escape. She found a piece of wire. Imagine a large cell and a door in it, a wooden door. In the middle of the door was a window. Luckily for us, there was no glass in it. It was broken. On the outside of the door was barred. It was a bar. And my mother, when the guard was walking around the bend and disappeared, she made a kind of a loop, extended her hand outside the window and tried to open the bar pull. After countless times, she finally opened it. And we ran into the back of the complex, and we were stopped by barbed wire, of course. Rusty barbed wire. Didn't stop my mother. She opened up with her hands for me to crawl through. Despite her efforts, I scratched my legs, scratched my back, tore my clothes, and then she forced her way through and also ripped up her, practically to shreds, her clothes, and was bleeding heavily. And we ran into the woods. And the setting was like a movie because the timing was such. So it happened that a farmer, a horse and a buggy, was very early in the morning, was passing by. My mother approached him and said, "Please take us with you because I escaped from the police station." He was so amazed that a young woman escaped from the Germans that he gave us a ride. And after a while, he told us to get off because more traffic intensified. And we looked really, really suspicious, bleeding and torn clothes and so forth. So we were hiding in the woods until evening. In the evening, my mother ventured into a village. And she was so thankful to a lazy housewife who left some clothing overnight on a clothesline. There were no clothes dryers there, clothesline. And she found a skirt and a blouse for herself. And for me, she was looking for some special clothes. What kind of clothes was she looking for me? There was no the Gap or Old Navy or something. It was war. Young people, anybody? Forgive me, from time to time I'm lapsed into asking questions like a good teacher. Well, it has something to do with my condition. She didn't want any more the trouble of recognizing us as Jews because of circumcision. So she put the clothing was quite too large on me. I looked like a scarecrow in it. And my mother said, later she was joking and said, "You didn't look like the prettiest girl in Poland, but you did okay." And I was parading around in clothes, very proud of myself. My hair was quite long because almost a year not cutting it. And we were walking. At a certain point in time, she stopped. She said to herself, why am I going south? What will I find there? Nobody is waiting. I don't have family there. And if I get to Romania, no good, because the Romanians were allies with Germans. Okay, I get to Hungary maybe. They were allies with Germans. And if I get even more south, by some miracle, no big bargain needed, because Mussolini and Italy was with the Germans. So she decided, she made what I call an executive decision. She decided to go back after she heard from some refugees which were kind of drifting back, that they heard from their relatives that the Russians are not shelling anymore, they are on the run. And there is no danger anymore. So we tracked back. Now, the track back is the winter of 42, we almost froze to death. We didn't have shoes. I outgrew my shoes, and my mother's shoes just fell apart. So she found some rags and with wire she was attaching it, and so constructed whatever she could find. Even newspapers she put around to, and in this we had to walk in deep snow. And many times my mother fell out of exhaustion and into the snow. And she described that she didn't want to get up. She felt so peaceful. She said, I so wanted like to go to sleep. First signs of freezing to death. I once told her, thanked her for saving my life so many times. She says, I think I should thank you. I wouldn't have survived without you. She knew that if she stays in that snow or freezes to death, I would be finished. So I gave her this energy and adrenaline to continue. She dragged me sometimes in the snow like a sled. Who saved our life were farmers with these huge sleds pulled by horses. That was the mode of transportation there. They didn't have trucks, and the snow was very deep. And in record time, really, we made it to Mr. Burka. We didn't go to our village, mind you. We were afraid. My mother waited for the night to set in, and when he walked out to feed the pigs or something, she approached him, and he didn't recognize her at the beginning, and then when he recognized her, he said, oh, yeah, of course, how are you, and so forth, very friendly. He asked about my father. They had very good business relationship. And when my mother told him that my father was murdered, he was very upset. She gave him the whole belt with the gold in it. Take it, she said. You are kind of the end of the road for us. Please give us shelter. And the man immediately said yes. But he says, quietly, I don't want my family to know. He didn't want his wife, sometimes carelessly mentioning something. He didn't want them to know it. Because harboring a Jew was punishable by death. By that. So he took us to a woodshed, In the woodshed was a wooden floor. At a certain area, a panel was cut out very expertly, camouflaged by some sacks and some garbage, and under it was a very shallow hall and very limited space, and that's what it was. He said, be very quiet, but because you can hear everything here, it's not deep enough. He brought us some straw, again like the other man, a kerosene lamp, a bucket for waste, and we stayed there, mind you, I would say about less than 2 years, about 20 months. We came at the beginning of 43 and were liberated at the end of 44. Now, this was a really cramped place. I'm very amused when I see some of my own kids complaining about when they grew up, oh, this room is too small for me. And I laugh. I say, well, you have to live with it, and that's it. But you know, we don't know how good we have it until we experience something bad. My mother was happy that we finally have a rest. Can you imagine the man endangering his life and his family's life for 20 months, while the other guy, after 10 days, tried to kill us? Amazing. The same culture, the same religion. I cannot explain. So my mother is happy. On one hand, we are safe. And the minute she looked at me, she wasn't that happy. She saw a boy which is a shadow of himself. She felt that I, without proper nourishment, and the men brought us food, mainly potatoes, and without proper nourishment, without the sun, without exercise, without exerting my intellect, let's say, we will be liberated. And she always believed that we will be liberated. But I be a deficient child. Well, according to her style, I have to do something about it. So she started exercising with me, crawling in that space, very limited. At night, pulled out pushed up that panel. We crawled out into the woodshed. I was walking back and forth. She opened the window for me to breathe the air because it was stuffy there in that hall. And yet she wasn't happy because I didn't have the sun. She knew that the child needs the sun. She couldn't help that. So, and what did she do for my brain? Well, the best she could. She couldn't do much. There was no paper, there was no crayons, there was nothing. Definitely no smartphones to play with. She devised stories. She told imaginative stories, and the stories were, she inserted there names of Polish personalities, or from the literature and so forth. And Polish names are difficult. Adam Mickiewicz, Henryk Sienkiewicz, and so on. I, at the end of the story, had to remember these Polish names, and sometimes I passed the test, and sometimes I didn't. If I didn't, my punishment was to listen again to the story very carefully, and to repeat it until I had it perfectly. She didn't give up. Now, I kind of was happy because my mother was focused on me, but that my mother didn't go crazy from this routine and stuff, it's a miracle, really is. At a certain point in time, in 1944, toward the end of the year, my mother became very agitated. She just wanted like to jump in the air. She said, "Oh, we are getting out of here. We are getting out of here," she was yelling. Because she heard the trumpet of the Messiah. Well, what I mean, voices of Russian voices. That's what she heard. We are being liberated, she said. So, imagine here is the hall. She's going up. Half of her body is above the floor and like staged. 4 Russian soldiers burst in with machine guns into the shed. They were looking for German. They were given orders to kill man, woman, child, if it's German. And she sensed the danger, and she was yelling, raised her hands and was yelling, "Yevreya, Yevreya, Jews, Jews." One wasn't that impressed with it. He walks over to her, makes a fist, hits her hard in the face. She falls in. She takes a grenade, wants to throw it in. The soldier behind him puts the gun to his head and says, "Let go of the grenade. You are not a murderer, you are a liberator." She is not German. This particular soldier was a Jewish guy. Now, can you imagine? Do you know what the odds are against it? A Jewish man and the whole division of Russians. It's just amazing. So I get scratched by rusty wire. I don't get blood poisoning. I walk without shoes in snow. I don't get frostbite. I don't eat. I eat garbage. Don't get even a stomachache. I go to an upscale restaurant today and come back with a stomachache. Definitely. So go figure it out. It's absolutely miraculous. But the last part, can you imagine being killed by the liberator? It's amazing. The Jewish soldiers, when he heard that we were in the dark for 20 months, he couldn't believe it. He says, "Don't go out. No matter what happens, don't go out. There is sun, there is snow on the ground, the reflection, you will be blinded." So he ran out and brought goggles, which he rubbed in some dirt into it to make it like filter. And I must have looked like from Mars, because very tiny with huge goggles walking. And for the first time, holding on to my mother, I walked into the sun. It was very cold, but it was very pleasant. And then I started crying. Why was I crying? Because I saw soldiers there. I was told soldiers to me were danger, no matter who they are. And the soldiers were so fascinated that a little boy and the mother, his mother survived all this ordeal. They made me like a mascot. They gave me candy and chocolate, and And here my life was in danger again. If my mother gave me that stuff. The doctor of this division rushed to my mother and said, "Don't you dare giving him this stuff. His body will not tolerate it, he will die. They love your boy, but they will kill him with their love." It reminds me a little bit of the American soldiers who liberated the death camps. They saw the walking skeletons. They were so shocked that they gave them chocolate to eat and so on, and they perished. And that's how we were liberated. We were going from DP camp to DP camp. We were looking at long lists of people that survived. And we found out that my grandma, Uncle Henry, survived. My grandpa died of a heart attack before he left the village. And the younger brother, Lonek, was killed by bandits after liberation. Very tragic. Interestingly enough, Uncle Henry, which met us later in Lodge, told us how he survived. He survived in the woods too. And he is over 6 feet. And can you imagine, he had a beard and hair, wild-looking man because of his grooming. And he found an axe somewhere. He knocked on the door and demanded food. We were begging for food. He was demanding food. And seeing this guy with wild eyes and an axe in his hand, they gave him food. And they were some who didn't. And he says, "Well, you don't want to give me food? Fine. I am from the partisans here, and if you don't give me what I ask, I will call you a collaborator. They will burn down your property." They gave him food. That's a different style. Quite successful. So after the war, my mother remarried, married another Holocaust survivor who lost a wife and 2 children, who himself jumped off a train going to a death camp, Eli Diamond. And we spent some trying years in Poland. I myself wanted so much to play in the street that my mother felt so bad not letting me, because it was a lot of lawlessness, and she was afraid for me. One day she left me. She let me go down, and this is just the night we came in the next morning. I didn't know the name of the street. I didn't know the number of the tenement, nothing. And I stand in front and I see a band passing by, a police band, playing, and I got so excited, carried away, I start walking after them, marching like they do. And after a while, they got to their destination, and I look around, and I don't know where I am. They ask me, "Little boy, where do you live?" I don't know. What's the name of your street? I don't know. So they left me alone. They called me pół głowy, half a head, missing. They thought I was a child, a little touched. And the Russians, I must tell you, I don't recognize them today. What they do in Ukraine, they became cruel people. They were very nice to us, I must say. Now, my mother went to the headquarters, the military headquarters, say, I saved my son, struggled for years, and now he disappears on me. She was frantic. They gave her a jeep, and they were calling up. They were calling up all the precincts and the police stations, and they called one police station and said, "Is there a little boy there with you?" And the guys, the police sergeant says, "Yes, as a matter of fact, he is. He likes to pray a lot." My mother said, "That's him." And because my mother taught me to pray Polish way, so pretending that I'm a good Polish child, kneel and pray, make a sign of a cross. And I must tell you something else which is kind of amazing. Everybody in the village talked Yiddish. My parents talked Yiddish. The mother talked to me Polish, only. Had she talked to me Yiddish, we would be gone. Just amazing. My stepfather found out that some parents of his and sisters and a brother survived, and they are in Israel. And in 1950, we came to Israel. Coming to Israel was like stepping into a paradise. From rainy, cold Poland and dangerous Poland into a free, sunny country. It was a pleasure. I was walking around looking. There were soldiers all over who didn't bother me. They were not dangerous for a change. It was a pleasure. Adjusting to the life, it was difficult for me. And adjusting and learning Hebrew was difficult for me. Yet I persevered. I even became a pretty good soccer player, surprisingly enough. I was the oldest one in my high school to graduate because I lost about 2 years of my struggle with the culture, with the subject, and I was 20. After the high school, you go to the army. And if you want to see some of the pictures, this is my picture of the army. Okay. And if you say you're wearing a British uniform, you'll be right, because this was from boot camp, and they give you any leftover garbage that they have to wear. So that Racheli's picture disappeared. No, it's not. Okay, so I just brought also a picture of my granddaughter who, and I cannot find it, who recently finished the army. And I came to the United States to study and to work at the same time. I couldn't do it successfully in Israel. I did it okay here. I went to the Jewish Theological Seminary and to Pace College. And yet I was kind of lacking something. I wasn't married. So God sent me a wonderful woman, Susan. And we are married 52 years, have 2 children, 8 grandchildren, and quite recently, 2 great-grandchildren. What do you say? Speak up. I can. I tell you, this is my family. This is my revenge against Hitler. And they are numerous, first of all, and all of them have blue eyes. You know Hitler is turning somewhere, and wherever he is, preferably where it's hot. He believed in this race superiority, crazy stuff. You have to have blonde hair and blue eyes, and then you're a superior race. He himself have dark hair and dark eyes. I look at my grandkids and I am full of pride because I say, I won. And my story is such that it impressed 2 people at the Holocaust Center at Glen Cove, and cinematographer and a writer and director who are trying to make now a dramatized documentary, and hopefully, if it's good enough, the documentary, a feature film on a strong Jewish woman, my mother. And I hope that they are succeed in this. And we're progressing nicely. And that's it.
Thank you so very much, Alex. If you want to take a few questions, if there are any questions from there, I just wanted, before we take some questions, of course I want to thank Alex. I couldn't help throughout his whole story thinking about that next Sunday is Mother's Day. And your story is, for them, really a story of your mother and her resilience and her determination to keep you alive.
Absolutely.
So as we celebrate Mother's Day, I think we should celebrate Alex's mother as well. What was her name? What was your mother's name? Hannah.
Like we named the granddaughter Hannah.
Oh, okay, beautiful.
L'chaim to all the mothers.
L'chaim. I also want to thank Suzanne Schwartz and her mom for sponsoring today's evening and bringing Alex to us. Your mom, I'm sorry, I met you earlier, but I don't remember her name. You work at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in Glen Cove, which is how she connected Alex to us here tonight. So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to take some questions or comments before we conclude for the evening.
If I don't know the answer, I will refer you to Susan. Okay. You're making a good observation, because my mother said once, and I got angry with her because he said, had it been my brother, she wouldn't survive. He would just act like a child, like cry out, whimper, while you had to be quiet. I say, don't say that, don't say that. My brother, very good guy, and never took, he understood it. I don't know, this is one of the mysteries. I was like a little mouse. When my mother told me to be quiet, I was quiet. I think the animalistic fear in us guided me, kind of. That my mother was mystified by it too, and then said what she said. My brothers, from the second marriage, brother, character was completely different. He would have cried, she felt. One of these mysteries that I cannot properly answer.
Anybody else? Susan, do you have a question?
Baruch Tiyeh. This is a good picture, but you look tougher than me.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one more comment. We all heard Alex's story here tonight. I think it's incumbent upon us to share his story with other people. I think we need to, share it with our children, share it with our neighbors, because that's the way we keep these stories alive, and that's the way we don't forget.
You're absolutely right, because I know Alex knows me more than 25 years. And he is living under the house of my friend and the East Meadow. And one night I went to the house after the concert there, and we're singing together at least half hour together, and I didn't know the story about you. I think our answer for all this is we have now our country, our land, Israel. And let's be final, and please rise and we sing a tikva together. And thank you everyone to come. Thank you Sandra, thank you Mindy. Thank you everyone to come in and to make this happen. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya Ulfa'ate mizrach kadima ayin letzion tzofia od lo avda tikvateinu ha-tikva bat shnot alpayim ליותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים. ליותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים. Thank you very much and Erev Tov. Good night to everyone.